as far as like weight loss goes, I do like a high flux lifestyle, high energy in, high energy out. And a part of a big piece of that, which I know you're aware of, Talor, is your metabolic currency, which has a lot to do with your metabolism and how much muscle mass you have. So the more lean muscle you have, the more metabolically active tissue you have in your body. So you're just going to burn more calories. And so I really enjoy eating, as most people do. It's one of the great pleasures of life.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have back on the show for a second time my good friend, Ryan Kennedy. He is a functional medicine practitioner and board certified clinical nutritionist. And he is someone that I have personally seen work with many high-level successful entrepreneurs, business people, C-level CEOs, C-level executives, people of that nature. And he is the person that when someone who's like a successful person, a driven person, but maybe their health is not dialed in, maybe they're not feeling as good as they could be, he's the person that I recommend to those people. And there's literally dozens and dozens of testimonials. I could take out my phone right now and call 10 people who Ryan has helped get into a better physical and mental health. So Ryan, it's such a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Appreciate the kind intro, Talor. It's always good to connect with you, brother.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So another thing actually that I should have mentioned in the intro is the amazing breathwork classes and recordings and things that you're doing now, sessions. I was lucky enough to experience one of your breathwork sessions in person firsthand at this retreat that we were on. And it was incredible, man. It was really powerful, really moving. So we'll get into a lot of stuff here today because you're an expert in nutrition. You're you're super ripped, into physical fitness as well and all that kind of stuff. So people who are looking to get ripped, people who are looking to get healthier, people who want more mental performance like biohackers. But let's start with this breath work because it's really, really powerful. So tell us a little bit about kind of the breath work that you lead people on and maybe some of the results that you're seeing people get.
Yeah, man, I call it peak state method, and breath work it's a bit of a vague term, right? It's kind of like saying the word exercise. Exercise could encompass running marathons or powerlifting or walking down the block with your dog. Like there's so much in the world of breath work that people think of, where some people's minds might go to like box breathing and relaxing techniques. Other people's minds might go to like Wim Hof and kind of that Tumo style breath work. The type of breath work I teach that I'm most passionate about, which to be clear, I love all these modalities. They all have their time and place. But the one that you're referring to is a modality called holotropic breath work, where you're doing this long form of rhythmic breathing that creates this transcendent state of mind. Easiest way I could explain it is it's almost like a plant medicine ceremony with no drugs, right? Like you're able to reach these subconscious, like tap into the subconscious and reach these different peak states, which is why I call it peak state breath work, that are quite life-changing, quite frankly. I mean, it's insane, man. I've had people go through these sessions that, start to finish are well under an hour and say, Ryan, that felt like 10 years of therapy in 1 hour. Or, Ryan, that was more powerful than an entire week of Tony Robbins conference in, 45 minutes. Like, what the heck just happened? And the reality is, man, our breath, when tapped into properly, is such an amazing way to shift your brain chemistry and really slow down this overactivation of your frontal lobe, which is your ego. It's your monkey mind. It's what inhibits a lot of, deeper thoughts and really holds people back as far as self-doubt and limited thinking and all these other challenges that we have in the human psyche. Enables you to push past all that, slingshots you right through it. And it puts you in this hard open state where you feel things more deeply, more gratitude, more love, and also more clarity on your journey, more clarity on your life, your vision, what you really want to get out of whatever it is you're pursuing with your relationship, with your career, with your family, with your personal goals. It's awesome, Talor. I mean, it's the most transformative thing I have ever discovered that could be done in less than 1 hour with no experience. Even if someone's never done it before, like it does not matter. It can deliver these benefits. And it always sounds like too good to be true. And then people go and do it and they're like, oh my gosh, my expectations were high and this over delivered. So it's something I've become really, really passionate about simply because I've seen the results. I've seen the impact it's had on thousands of students at this point. It's changed my life, which is how I got into it. And I've developed this peak state method that curates this style of breathing that's overlaid with the right music, these binaural beats, these different frequencies that are actually changing your brainwave patterns during the breath work, combined with spoken word that's helping to guide the experience and unlock and tap in and giving you these different prompts that combined all together. I mean, it's one of a kind.
Yes, I can definitely attest to that. I mean, and again, so for people who are trying to kind of figure, this is not just like kind of like a meditative breathing where you're closing your eyes and breathing and thinking about nothing. Like in this practice, we had headphones on.
That's right.
It must have been close to an hour long, right? 45 minutes to an hour or something like that.
It's actually much shorter. So the active portion of the breath work is about 25 minutes.
25 minutes. Okay.
You lose track of time because you're in like this
totally
altered state. And then I have this guided visualization I lead people through immediately after the active breathing. That's another 20, 25 minutes. So total, it's about 45 to 50 minutes from start to finish, but only about half of that is the active breath work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just remember like going through it, like it's crazy, man. We were in a room full of alpha males and like, I think probably half the room was like tearing up, crying, like just like having emotional experiences. Like you can't really explain it, but and in a great way, in a really good way, like a release or a focus or a this, or like, I'm like, as soon as it's over, I'm like journaling, and then I'm like, texting my wife and daughters how much I love them, and, realizing all these different, all the real priorities in my life and focusing on them. And so, yeah, it was really, really, truly powerful experience. And it's interesting how you combine that with all the other work that you're doing. So now I think you've seen how powerful it is. And so now you've been kind of, incorporating that into your practice with all the other health and nutrition stuff that you're teaching, right?
That's right. So I combine this peak state method with a lot of the functional medicine that I teach in my practice to the people I work with. And it's such a powerful 1-2 punch combo, Talor, because the biggest challenge in the health and wellness industry, which I'm sure you can attest to, is just doing the darn thing, right? Yeah. It's not the lack of information. There's information at our fingertips everywhere we look. And it's rarely lacking like what to do or what's healthy, what's not healthy. People really understand this on a fundamental level. It's consistently executing on the fundamentals, right? Like very few people are oblivious to the fact that they should move their bodies and not sit all day, that they shouldn't stay up till 2 a.m. watching Netflix. They should get some sleep, that they shouldn't be eating ice cream after dinner. Like these are not like secret like truths that people don't have access to. This is like basic common sense at this point in our society. But so few people consistently execute on these things day in and day out. And a big part of that is right here. It's the mindset. It's the psychology and the deeper rooted stuff that really drives our behaviors. And so one of the things that I love about stacking this specific peak state breath work with the functional medicine is that it bridges that gap. It helps to really shift people's identity, because that's the biggest problem. Most people think that they struggle with their habits because they're too tired or they're too busy or a million other reasons. But the real reason is that they don't identify as a healthy person, as a fit person, as the type of person that they're trying to become. That there's a disconnect. There's this misalignment. And most often, in order to really create this identity shift, truly create this internal shift in your mind, it requires some sort of traumatic event, some sort of emotional trigger, right? The death of a loved one, or a terminal diagnosis, or maybe, you're on the brink of divorce, or any number of other examples. The birth of a child, could really trigger this for some people. Well, what's cool about what I teach is that it creates that emotional charge without anyone you love having to die, without having to have this crazy life-changing event happen. You can actually manufacture that in a very short amount of time. So you don't have to be, the other way to conventionally changing habits is to consistently execute day in and day out over the course of months and months and months until you can look yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm the type of person that does this. There's not a shadow of a doubt. Like I am a fit, healthy person because I have a track record of success over the past, 3 months or 6 months or a year, whatever. Well, that's hard to get to. That's a very hard thing for people to get to. And so this peak state method gets you there. And then I come in and I help people with their functional medicine lab testing and understanding what nutrient deficiencies or imbalances they have, and then correcting it with targeted protocols in order to really balance out their body so that they can feel and perform their best.
Amazing, amazing, man. I'm sure we'll ask you, obviously, you may as well plug your website or anywhere that people can. Is there anywhere where people can access this breathing like on its own? Is there a separate website or program, or at the moment, is it just part of your other packages that you offer?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. I do teach this breath work online and done in the comfort of your own home, facilitated on a Zoom call, which most people might be hearing that and thinking, oh, that's probably not the real deal. Trust me, it's the real deal. Taylor can attest, like it's an audio experience. And so once I bring in the journey into your headphones, as long as you're in a safe space, like in your bedroom or at your office, like laying on the floor, doing the technique, you're going to get the benefits even if you're not at one of my live sessions, right? Like in person, I mean.
Yeah.
So I host them live. The next one's coming up soon. People can sign up, and even if you can't make it on that day and time, you get access to the replay to do it anytime over the next week. So that's one piece of it if people just want to try this peak state breath work. But like you mentioned, I combine it with the actual material changes to create transformation in your life. Like you could feel all the feelings and have the breakthroughs and have the mental shifts, but you still got to take action, and making sure those actions are the best actions, the most efficient path to get to your goals, whether that be more energy, better sleep, increased libido, longevity, improved gut health, improved muscle mass, fat loss. Like everyone has their own goals, right? But having the detailed guidance and action plan to get you there. So I stack it. I have a men's program, I have a women's program, available on my website, ryankennedyhealth.com. And that's really where I bring kind of merge those two things together.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. I highly, highly recommend people try this, right? Even doing it over Zoom, it might even be better because you have like the privacy and the comfort of your own home. And,
Yes.
Sometimes there are people that probably would release a lot more if there wasn't 50 people around them, maybe, right? Too.
Correct.
So I think there's benefits to doing it both ways. And usually I wouldn't ask someone to plug something so early in the episode, but this is something special. It's something I've experienced firsthand. And I really think that people should give it a shot and try it out. So yeah, really, really, really awesome with the holotropic breath work. And then, yeah, let's kind of talk a little bit more about, so you get a lot of high powered CEOs, maybe people who are under a lot of stress, things of that nature. So they're coming to you, and what are the different tests and things that you're kind of looking at when you're kind of doing an intake there on new customers?
Yeah, no, great question, man. And, we'll typically run a full blood panel as a good foundation. And that's not just like the type of blood panel you get at a medical doctor's office of a CBC and a CMP. I'm talking thyroid panel, hormones, certain nutrient levels we could test via blood, looking at a full lipid panel, because that gives us a really good data set to work off of, and all these different organ systems and how everything's functioning. And if you have low testosterone, or if you have, for women, low progesterone, or if there's any issues with your thyroid that's preventing you from losing weight, even though you're eating well and exercising, so all these different areas of the body. And then the second test, so that's one, is blood work. The second test that complements blood work really well that I run from almost everyone I work with is called an organic acids test. And you and I have done this test together, Taylor, so you could attest it really complements blood work well because it's measuring completely different things. It's looking at your gut health, any imbalances in your microbiome, like candida or yeast overgrowth, or any type of mycotoxins, or SIBO, bacteria overgrowth, or any type of pathogens like C. diff. So we can really see, like, is there any imbalances in your gut microbiome that may be causing indigestion or just other types of symptoms that aren't even related to your digestion? It looks at your oxalate metabolites to see if you should be avoiding plant foods that are really high in this compound called oxalic acid that could be a real stealth cause of inflammation for people. It also looks at your mitochondria.
We actually had someone on the podcast who wrote a whole book called Toxic Superfoods and told her whole story about how she used to eat all these foods that she thought was healthy, raw spinach and raw kale and even sweet potatoes, apparently. And she had very high oxalates and had all these problems, even though she thought she was eating healthy. And so, yeah, like, again, raw spinach, now again, if you're fine on your oxalate levels, then a lot of these foods are probably fine. But if you have high oxalates, it's important to know that because you may want to skip some of these high oxalate so-called healthy superfoods.
You nailed it, Taylor. And I've had guys come to me, and gals too, that have had chronic pain, whether it be chronic inflammation in their knees. I had a guy come to me with gout-like symptoms where his toes were so inflamed and his uric acid was low. He didn't have gout in the conventional way. He had multiple surgeries done on these toes to try and repair the damage because he was having trouble walking. And I ran this test. I see his oxalates are high as a kite, way off the charts. We pull those foods out of his diet. Within 60 days, this guy is pain-free. And he had been suffering with this issue for years and had seen multiple specialists, multiple surgeons. And all along, it was the freaking almonds he was snacking on every day. So those are the types of insights that state-of-the-art lab testing can really bring to light that you wouldn't be able to figure out otherwise, that are really useful to know.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, it looks at your mitochondria health, so your energy system. So how your Krebs cycle is producing ATP, the energy currency of the body. It also looks at your brain chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. These are really key to how you feel and your focus and your motivation and your mood. And, people that suffer from bouts of depression or people that suffer from ADHD or just lack of focus and lack of drive. We can see, is there an imbalance in your neurochemistry, in these brain chemicals that are causing these issues that we can easily and quickly correct? So there's really good ways to do that and safe ways to do that we could dive into. It also looks at your vitamin levels, your amino acids. So it's like 80 markers. It's very, very comprehensive in terms of just complementing blood work. So with those two tests, which together, are not terribly expensive, they're a few $100 each. They're very, very valuable for us to really understand what's going on and then design appropriate protocols for how you should be eating, your fitness, your daily routines, your supplementation, all these different areas of your life in order to know hey, what I'm actually doing, what I'm putting in my body is what I actually need.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of those tests. My wife took it. I took it. We got some great insights. We started taking some supplements based on the results of those tests after. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan. Question for you. What do you think about DNA testing? Do you think it's useful at all? We've had a couple of people over the years on the podcast talking about DNA testing. And I think the future of it is certainly very, very exciting where, if you have a certain, you have the Alzheimer's gene or whatever, and they're able to snip it out and just get rid of it. I think that's coming in the next, let's say 100 years to be conservative, but maybe a lot sooner than that. So I think it's pretty exciting, but I know, there's the blood and the organic acids test and the blood test. Those are showing your actual markers right now in this day and time. But DNA what do you think about DNA testing?
It's a great question. And there's a couple of different ways to use the data. I think it can be useful is the short answer. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a priority and I don't run it for most people I work with. So one context, a guy named Gary Brecka popularized this gene SNP testing, which I think is what you're asking about. And this is different than 23andMe. These are specific gene SNPs that tell you about your methylation pathways and tell you some information. And his test is a total ripoff, as far as the price for, 5 gene SNPs, you could run 300 gene SNPs for less than half the cost. So it's not a good value, but he did popularize this. And, a lot of the data isn't that actionable in the sense that let's use MTHFR gene. It's a SNP that tells you whether or not you methylate and whether you need methyl B vitamins like methylfolate and methylcobalamin. The reason I don't find that valuable, Talor, is because I put everyone on methyl B vitamins, regardless of this gene SNP. There's no one that should be taking folic acid and cyanocobalamin. Everyone should be taking bioavailable methyl B vitamins. So it doesn't actually change the course of my recommendation. So there are things that can be useful, like seeing, again, some people like to see, am I a slow or fast caffeine metabolizer? You probably know. If you drink coffee, do you get anxious and jittery, or do you tolerate it just fine? So some of those things I don't find as actionable. Some things can be a little bit of, negative mentally in the sense you use the Alzheimer's gene, ApoE gene, as far as the allele. And if you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's, sometimes that can really get in your head and be very worrisome and actually cause you to create this self-fulfilling prophecy where you're like, darn it, I'm going to get Alzheimer's and my cognitive decline is not as good as it could be. And it kind of creates this nocebo effect to some degree for certain people. Now, that's not the case for everyone. Other people use it as a motivator. They say, because I have this gene SNP, I'm going to do everything in my power to eat well and exercise and do all the proven things that help to reduce my risk of developing cognitive decline. And it really works in their favor. So it's a kind of personalized thing. Some people don't want to know that information of I have an increased risk of breast cancer. Well, it's what are you going to do with it? Is what I ask people. Are you going to use this as a motivator and fuel you to make the right changes in your life? Or is it just going to become a stressor and just create mental and emotional turmoil because now you're constantly thinking about this risk that you identified, which doesn't guarantee anything, right? It just increases your risk. But a lot of this is still determined on epigenetics, and that's all based on our lifestyle, environments, and behaviors. So, I'll run it for some people that request it, Telor, but it's not my first line of testing by any means.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. I mean, a way to know if a supplement company is actually knows what they're doing or is just using cheap stuff is if you have B12 in your vitamin that you're taking and you look on the label and it says B12 from cyanocobalamin, I think it's however it's pronounced. That's basically from the cyanide molecule. Nobody wants to be taking any kind of cyanide based B12. You always want the methyl B12, always look for the methyl B12, and that's how you'll know if your supplement company, vitamin company is actually giving you the right nutrient there when they're giving it. But you're right. I take a methyl B12. I can't even remember what my MTHFR thing was. I did it so many years ago, but I take a methyl B12 anyway, right? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also kind of do agree with you. I think it can be very, very dangerous. In fact, I've always been fascinated with the placebo effect of things, right? And in fact, it's the reason why we have to have, double-blind placebo-controlled trials is because before they had that, when they would just, say, give people a drug and say, hey, did you feel better? Everyone felt better because it was just a placebo effect, right? So you literally have to, and so many drugs were passing when it was just based on placebo. So you have to be very careful about these things. And also, I've actually been, it's interesting. I wonder what your opinion is on this. So many people, when they're like, oh, family history, genetics, things like that, I often wonder, is it really the genetics? I know in some cases it is, or is it just that you have the same lifestyle habits that your parents had? Right? If your parents ate a certain way and you're continuing to eat that way because that's what you were fed when you were a kid, then you may have the same outcome as your parents, but that doesn't, was it because of the genes or was it because of the lifestyle? I always think about that.
Yeah. People come in and they say, Ryan, the reason I struggle with my weight is because everyone in my family is overweight. Like obesity runs in my family. I'll tell them, no, the reason is nobody runs in your family, right? And it's just like a kind of a little joke to drive home the point you're making, Laura, which is like, poor lifestyle choices, dietary patterns, a lot of these things are passed down from generation to generation. If you were to change your lifestyle, regardless of the genetic predispositions, would you really be destined to the same fate as your previous generations, your parents, your grandparents? And my belief is no. My belief, and the work of guys like Dr. Bruce Lipton and a lot of others in this world of epigenetics will attest to the data, which is upwards of 90% of health and disease outcomes are dictated by your choices. Mm-hmm. Less than 10%, some would even say less than 5% is actually related to your actual gene predispositions.
Yep. So amazing. So you're focusing on a real full-on blood panel, doing the organic acids test. And then what are some of the other big factors, the big things that you're seeing people struggle with, or some big things that really move the needle for people the most?
The number one is energy, man. Energy is really the currency of life. And when you have low energy, everything is hard. Exercising is hard. Getting your work done with your business or your job is hard. Being a good father or a good mother, being a good spouse, like everything becomes an uphill battle when your energy is not good. And so that's a huge, huge kind of key domino that I focus on with everyone is how can we increase your natural baseline energy? Regardless, not saying you just drink more caffeine or you just have energy supplements per se. How can we actually improve your cellular energy status? And that's a combination of things. Obviously, sleep optimization is a big cornerstone of that, making sure that you're getting adequate rest and recovery and making sure you're getting good quality sleep, not just quantity. And then things like sunlight that help to recharge your mitochondria is a big component. So getting out for morning sun, as well as laying out during solar noon, literally recharging your cellular batteries. That near infrared light we get from the sun is immensely helpful for that. Nutrition plays a big part in this, making sure you're not consuming high sugar, high starch, really unhealthy foods, especially during the day when you want to fuel your brain and body optimally. So I have a lot of people start with a good smoothie to kick off their day, which is really light. Because part of the challenge too, Talor, is even if you're eating healthy foods, let's say you're having like steak and eggs for breakfast. These aren't bad foods by any means. They're very nutrient dense. They're not high in carbs either. They shouldn't, jack up your blood sugar. But it requires a lot of energy to be diverted into your digestive system to break down these heavy fats and heavy proteins. Yeah. And that takes away from how you're going to feel cognitively, which is why when people do intermittent fasting, they typically feel so good, is that you aren't diverting any energy towards digestion, right? Yeah. So a smoothie is a nice in between where you could bring in a lot of the micronutrients your body needs to feel awesome, but it's something that's very easy for your gut to break down. And same thing applies for lunch. Instead of having a ribeye steak, I'll have people have a fillet of fish. So much easier to break down protein as just some simple examples of how this is put into action day in and day out. So that plays a big role. And then there's a lot of other things nutritionally. We already talked about B vitamins, but there's a lot of things that play a big role in your energy pathways that I oftentimes uncover. So part of my work as a clinical nutritionist in my practice is identifying what vitamins and minerals and micronutrients are people lacking. Are they not getting enough of through their diet? Are they low on via blood testings or organic acids testing, so that we know what their body is missing? Because if you're missing some of these key building blocks, your energy is going to suffer, right? And so that's where a lot of this stuff comes into play. And we talked a little bit about gut imbalances. When you have candida overgrowth, when you have SIBO, when you have some of these imbalances in your microbiome, yes, it could cause bloating. Yes, it could cause gas. Yes, it could cause a lot of abnormalities with your digestive function. But it can also cause fatigue. It can also cause brain fog. It can also cause issues that you wouldn't associate with a gut imbalance, but is having that direct impact on your day-to-day performance and quality of life. So that's a big area that I focus on with everyone I work with. No one comes to me, Talor, who's like, I got more energy than I know what to do with, Ryan. Even if you're feeling like you're 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, like you feel really good, there's always opportunity for improvement, right? There's always opportunity for improvement. And even a 5 or 10% boost makes a massive difference in all these different areas of your life. And for a lot of the people I work with, their daily performance dictates so much of their livelihood, right? Their income and their revenue and how they produce, abundance for themselves and their families. And so if we can really ramp that up, not only does it make a big difference in their enjoyment of their life and how they, love and spend time with others, but also in their ability to increase their income, improve their business, improve their career, improve whatever it is that they do in the world. And that is immensely valuable, man.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. Energy is so important. When you're low energy, you're not in a good mood. You can be crankier. It can cause problems with relationships and people around you. You don't have the energy to do the things you want to do. It's funny because people, I own a supplement company and people, ask me all the time about supplements. And I'm like, look, the supplements for me are like just the extra 10 or 20%, right? You can't just eat like crap and not get sun and sit down all day and not move and then just take a bunch of supplements and think that everything's going to be fine, right? Like, obviously you want to supplement for some deficiencies and things like that. But for me, it's like, yeah, I take supplements for that extra 10 or 20% because that extra 10 or 20% means a lot, right? And, I feel like I'm in a good place now where, there were periods of my time where I was lower energy, where, if I did a hard workout, I couldn't do anything the next day or whatever. Right. And now I'm like, hey, I'm in a place where I can actually do something every day, like play pickleball on my days off and, lift weights, 4 or 5 days a week and play pickleball twice a week and stay active every day. And that helps continue this cycle of positive energy and positive, mindset and feeling good and things like that. So yeah. And just from everything from spending time with your kids, if you have them, or family, or growing a business, everything requires energy. And so, yeah, we have to be dialed in with everything regarding energy. So I think that's just a great number one thing there for everyone.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, man. And then a couple other things that I would say are really common as far as things I focus on in my practice would be hormones, in terms of seeing where people have imbalances in their hormone profile. And it's overwhelmingly common to see guys with low testosterone and to see women with estrogen dominance, which is where their estrogen is high, their progesterone is low, and the balance and ratio between the two is out of whack. And these cause a lot of problems in your quality of life. At the end of the day, we all want to look good and feel confident in our own skin, but what really matters to just how we feel, right? That's really what dictates our enjoyment of life. you could have everything going well around you and have, financial success and have, great spouse and great kids and a whole bunch of abundance in your life. But if you feel lousy, you're not really going to enjoy it, right? So you want to make sure you're actually improving the elements that are going to dictate how you feel day to day. And so there's a lot of strategies that we could dive into in as much detail as you want to kind of correct those issues, because I rarely, if ever, refer out for hormone replacement therapy. It's almost always done naturally in terms of bringing in. And I know your company really specializes in some great stuff. And I love your guys' products at Peak Performance. I use them in my practice, and, things to help naturally boost testosterone. And like you said, it's one of multiple elements in conjunction with other lifestyle changes, other behavior changes, other environmental changes. But, these herbs can be really powerful tools to help increase your body's production of these different hormones, and can make a world of difference in terms of just your vitality and your day-to-day function.
Nice. Yeah. So for the men listening now who are like, all right, what are some of these herbs that you like? What are some of your favorite supplements maybe, or things that you would recommend for people who want to increase their testosterone for men?
Yep. So first place I look is nutrient deficiencies. So low vitamin D, low zinc, low copper, not enough magnesium. And these are all things I'll test for. So we're not just guessing. And so making sure we have adequate amounts of the raw materials that your body needs to produce these hormones. And then the next place that I look is it the total and the free testosterone. So what's actually bioavailable? Because for a lot of guys, their total testosterone might be okay. Might be 600, 700, 800, which is good. It's perfectly fine. But because of their binding proteins are elevated, their sex hormone binding globulin, their albumin, what's actually bioavailable is very low. And that's what dictates how you feel, because that's what your bodies can actually use. And so I really like stinging nettle extract to help lower those binding proteins as a great strategy. And then I also will incorporate things to help boost the total picture. Epimedium is one of my favorites because not only does it help with testosterone, it also helps with blood flow and libido and sexual performance. So it's a very noticeable effect, very effective. So I love Epimedium.
What was that one again?
Epimedium.
Epimedium. I haven't heard of that one. Interesting.
Oh, it's a fantastic herb. It's one of my top picks to lure. And usually I'll put together like kind of a complex or a formula that has multiple of these ingredients because they all work in different pathways. I know you're a big fan of Tongat Ali. Tribulus is fantastic. And we also have to look at like what's part of the problem. So if there's a guy who's highly stressed, a lot of mental, emotional stress or just physical stress, maybe he's an athlete. He does a lot of endurance training. He does a lot of like just pounding the pavement, hours and hours of exercise while he's running a company. We're going to want to look more towards adaptogens to help lower that stress output, to help manage his stress, which is going to translate to improved testosterone, right? So that's going to be a big thing for him. And then, so that there is some context depending on the guy. There's not a one-stop shop like, hey, everyone gets this, because not everything works for the same, not the same product doesn't work for all men. So you want to kind of find what is going to be a clue. And that's part of the clinical picture of just kind of working up all these different variables and then deciding what's going to really be the best and most effective route to take. So that's what I see work really well for most of the guys I work with. I'm curious to hear your feedback on DHEA, Talor. I've recently stopped using it in my practice. I've seen it help. I've seen it not help. It's a tricky one because DHEA is a precursor to your hormone profile. So your body takes it and creates testosterone. But oftentimes, I'd say 80+% of the time, even when I bring in a clinically relevant dose of DHEA, it doesn't seem to move the needle for a lot of the guys I've worked with. So I've kind of become a little less, a little more skeptical, I should say, on DHEA.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews on it as well. We don't sell it as a company, but I have heard mixed reviews on it. I was recommended to take like 25 milligrams. I probably take it 3 times a week or something like that, just because, I was kind of told to. But I can't say that I necessarily feel any difference or that it increased my levels or anything like that. I definitely can't say that. So that's interesting. I may not reorder that one. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to take, and I think there is some small percentage of guys that do notice a difference based on my clinical experience, but it's not something I'm not a big advocate of it at this stage. Yeah. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that we'll tap into kind of as second and third order of kind of strategies, depending on how the foundational stuff is really moving the needle. So you might look at peptides. We might look at doing other things. There's a lot of pharmacological interventions before TRT that could be useful. Things like HCG and clomiphene that can help produce more testosterone, but you don't run into all the other issues that some men want to avoid, such as fertility problems, such as increases in hemoglobin and hematocrits and the thickening of your blood. There's a lot of things that, while TRT can be a really useful tool in certain instances, it also has, you got to be totally aware of some of the downsides. And there are downsides, and there are some side effects that people sometimes get. And so, yeah, you just got to kind of look at the full picture.
Yep. I'm going to ask you for a little bit of coaching on myself. So one thing that the one marker that always pisses me off on my test that I get is my HbA1c. My insulin is very good, very good levels of that. But my HbA1c, for some reason, is a little bit high. It's not at the pre-diabetic level, but it's like kind of like whatever it is, I think like 5.5 or something like that, 5.6 maybe, even like right under the kind of pre-diabetic level, which is really strange because I don't eat much carbs. I don't eat sugars or added sugars or anything like that, which interestingly, someone once told me that because I was eating very low carb, that might be causing this situation where my HbA1c was a little high, and he was recommending that I add more carbs. And I'm like, wait, won't that increase my HbA1c? Like, I'm a little confused here. I have started incorporating a little bit of honey into my diet. So I'd say that would be the only kind of like, sugar and carbs consistently that I'm getting. And then, every once in a while I'll have some more like sweet potatoes or something like that. But actually, for the most part recently, I just haven't been craving them. I feel better on low carb. I have a history of getting inflamed when I, do like high carb type stuff. So I tend to feel better on low carb, but just curious if you, any insights or ideas there.
Yeah, it might not be anything to worry about, Talor, in that hemoglobin A1C, just for people listening in, is kind of an average, typically speaking, of how your body's regulating your blood sugar over the past 90 days or so. And it's not a perfect marker in that you can get falsely high readings of A1C. And that has to do with your red blood cell turnover. Because with hemoglobin A1C, we're testing the glycated hemoglobin in the red blood cell. And so if your red blood cells are not turning over as quickly as someone else's might, that can leave that A1C as a higher reading because it's sticking around longer. Doesn't necessarily mean you're insulin resistant or you have any metabolic syndrome or that your blood sugar regulation is a problem. It could be that you're totally fine and that there's no issue. It's just that A1C is not the perfect marker for you. And I actually had a guy I worked with that this was the case. And he came to me with much higher levels than you, Talor. His A1C was chronically between 5.8 and 6.2, which is pre-diabetic. And he was a fit guy, low body fat percentage. His diet wasn't perfect, but we cleaned it up quite a bit. And his A1C was still in that pre-diabetic range. And so you mentioned running fasting insulin is a great proxy to kind of check, is your insulin below 5 or below 3, even better? Really good sign that there's not any insulin resistance going on. I also had him wear a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, just to see what's your kind of baseline. Are you constantly in the triple digits, even when you're fasted? What's your spike? How high is your levels getting after meals? That can also give you additional context on if glycemic variability is in fact an opportunity for improvement, or if this A1C is just not the best marker for your body specifically.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Yeah, that's really good. Let's talk a little bit about weight loss, which obviously men or women both are interested a lot of times. But I go back to when we were at this retreat. I just remember you had this humongous plate of food, and had all these. It was great food, really super healthy stuff. But like, you were eating, man. You were not holding back on eating. And I know you're active and as well, so talk a little bit about that. Are maybe some people are under eating and not getting enough nutrients. How do you look at kind of because you're obviously ripped. I know you're obviously very active as well. But yeah, how do you look at weight loss, and when clients come to you, looking to lose weight, and just talk a little bit about your own eating habits, and maybe do you monitor how many calories and protein? What are you trying to hit for the day?
Yeah, so I don't track super diligently 365, but I do go through windows where it is good to have that type of data of understanding like what your macro profiles look like, what's coming in. So I think tracking is a good tool, and it doesn't need to be done chronically for most people, but doing it for a period of time to get a gauge on this stuff, I do recommend to most people I work with, even if it's a photo-based meal tracking where they're sending me photos and I'm calculating their macros for them. I've been doing this so long, I could get pretty good and close accuracy on kind of computing these things just by looking at a plate of food. And so as far as like weight loss goes, I do like a high flux lifestyle, high energy in, high energy out. And a part of a big piece of that, which I know you're aware of, Talor, is your metabolic currency, which has a lot to do with your metabolism and how much muscle mass you have. Mm-hmm. So the more lean muscle you have, the more metabolically active tissue you have in your body. So you're just going to burn more calories. And so I really enjoy eating, as most people do. It's one of the great pleasures of life. Mm-hmm. So it makes a lot of sense that, hey, if you build some muscle and you stay, active physically, you're going to be able to eat more calories without clogging up your system and gaining weight. So that's a big piece of this, is just building muscle, doing the right types of things, having enough protein, things that are signaling an upregulation in your metabolism, and really signaling to your metabolic system, hey, there's a lot of abundance. There's not a lot of scarcity. So while getting into a caloric deficit is a fantastic tool and a necessary component to weight loss, like it really is like the law of physics, like energy conservation, it also, when done chronically, can downregulate your metabolism and downregulate your thyroid function. And so it's about doing it very strategically. So first thing I'll do when someone comes, let's say someone came to me and they're like, Ryan, I want to lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds. I'm not like obese, but I want to get more shredded. I want to get like more lean for health reasons and for aesthetic reasons. Well, first thing I would do is look at where their thyroid panel is, and not just thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, which is what most people get run at a physician's office. That is like tip of the iceberg. You also need to look at T4. You need to look at T3, which is your active thyroid hormone. You need to look at free T3, just like testosterone. Not all of this is bioavailable. And then you need to look at your uptake percentage of how much your cells are absorbing of that free T3. And so that's a really good place to start, because I've had so many people come to me, Talor, who are like eating well, portioning out their food, tracking things diligently, exercising consistently, and they are just freaking defeated, man, because they're not seeing results. And they're like, what the heck's going on? I'm putting in the effort. I'm diligent. I'm trying my best. I'm sacrificing all these things, and yet I'm not losing body fat. And a lot of that comes back to the thyroid function. And so I actually really like, there's things like iodine, selenium, all these nutrients that can support thyroid function. But I really like using either a desiccated thyroid, which can bring in some of this T3 and T4 hormone in a way that I prefer over the pharmacological options, or T2. T2 is another thyroid support that I really like, and you and I could talk more about this offline. I don't know if Peak Performance produces one, but it's something that works great, and there's awesome research behind this. And then there's lifestyle factors, sleep and stress and your nutrition and all these other things that will influence your thyroid. And sometimes people need to do a course of reverse dieting, where they're intentionally eating more calories in order to get their metabolism back online, in order to recalibrate their metabolic set point to actually start to see progress moving forward, because they've just dieted their way down to where it's this constant game of scarcity and they're eating less and less and less. And then it pigeonholes them into this really brutal lifestyle. Yeah. And so you got to kind of take a step back and say, hey, I got to I got to eat more food, which most people are pretty happy to do. But that might result in temporary weight gain, which most people are very afraid of. And you got to kind of talk them through, this is an important part of the process. Like, do you want to constantly live in this place of deficit, or do you want to have one step backward to take 5 steps forward, right? And then as you go through this process, there's also a lot of strategies to help to refeed and signal to your body that things are going well. So I don't like doing a severe caloric deficit, 7 days a week, months and months on end, because that will create this downregulation. So you got to create a strategy where you're having this kind of feast famine cycling. That's what a lot of people call it. And I mean, people have been talking about this for long time, having like a cheat day or like the 4-hour body, talks about like, hey, Saturday, you eat anything you want. Well, not only does that give you some mental break from any kind of, discipline or deprivation people are feeling during a dieting period, but they're also actually signaling to their bodies in a positive way that creates more sustainability with this process. So there's the biochemical stuff. There's the food itself. A lot of people are under eating protein. The biggest issue I'm seeing in this world right now, Taylor, is people who are misusing the GLP-1 drugs. And when I say misusing, what I mean is that they're taking Ozempic or Wegovy or any of these GLP-1 weight loss drugs. And obviously it shuts off your appetite. So you eat way, way, way less. The problem is for every 10 pounds of weight loss, they're losing 6 or 7 pounds of muscle. So they're losing a lot of muscle throughout this process because they're not lifting weights. They're not doing enough resistance training, and they're not eating nearly enough protein, right? Yep. And so that creates this scenario I'm describing where you just eat less and less and less and less. And then you end up at a plateau. You're not losing any more weight, but you're like, dude, I'm eating like 1,200 calories a day and I'm like an active guy, or I'm eating like 800 calories a day as a woman. And that's just so unsustainable. And the second you get off the drug, you gain all the weight back. And so these can be useful tools, these GLP-1 drugs, but you need to be monastic about your weight training and your protein intake in order to kind of get some of the benefits without all of the downsides. Yeah. There's also GLP-1. I don't know if you've also looked into this, but there's these Akkermansia strains of probiotics.
Yeah. We're looking into those right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Much, much less powerful in terms of the effects, but still similar effects as far as targeting that GLP-1 pathway. So these probiotics that contain the strain of Akkermansia are clinically shown, and I've used them in my own practice with people and seen really good results of just kind of tampering down your cravings, tampering down your appetite, tampering down your propensity to overeat or binge on sugar or have any of these other challenges. It's not like, if the drug is a 10 out of 10 effect, these probiotics are probably a 3 or 4 out of 10 effect as far as like the strength. But hey, that's pretty good, especially knowing that it's actually having a positive influence on your gut microbiome and it's not like having any dangerous side effects long term. So those are things I'll use. And then back to the high flux lifestyle, like it's really important to make sure you're doing you're pairing your nutrition approach with the right physical activity and movement approach, so making sure you're getting adequate movement, which will enable you to eat more calories as well. And then your body's loaded up with micronutrients. It's healthy. Weight loss in a healthy body is so much easier, man, than trying to lose weight if you have inflammation, if you have these imbalances, if your body is not vital and healthy. It just wants to hold on to this body fat. And then there's toxicities that can, cause weight loss resistance, because we store a lot of toxins in our body fat. And so heavy metals and different chemicals and mycotoxins and mold exposure and all these things that can actually make weight loss more challenging. So it is a big part of what I do, man, because at the end of the day, like, people will kind of look down upon like goals of wanting to look ripped and look good. But I think it's great. I'm like, dude, there's nothing wrong with wanting to look your best. Feel confident in your own skin, be proud of your body, like, be able to go to the beach and really be, happy with your physique. Like, what's wrong with that? This whole like body positivity movement has just swung the pendulum in the right direction where people hear that and they think like, oh my gosh, you're such a vain, like superficial person. And it's like, no, dude, you just want to look good in your own skin. What's wrong with that? So I'm in big support of like body transformation. I think it's a great catalyst too of giving you the confidence to achieve success in other areas of your life.
100%, man. 100% agree with that. And, I recently heard someone say this. I hadn't actually thought about this before, but, I heard a successful kind of older man and a younger guy asked him like, hey, what advice do you have for me or whatever? And he's like, get fit, work out. He's like, because when I see someone and I can tell that they're fit and they're ripped and they take care of their body, I know they have some discipline. I know that they're like someone who's getting after it. It's proof. It's undeniable proof because results don't lie, right? And, when you have the results, it's undeniable proof that you put in the work, that you have discipline. And so there's just kind of an aura of respect that comes with that. So
yeah, you can't buy it. You can't just like, you could buy personal training sessions and buy support, but you still got to do the work, right? So like, you can't just buy your way to a great body and you can't just inherit it either. Like, you can wealth where it's like, you don't just get a trust fund that gives you like amazing health and a six pack. Like,
Right.
so it's one of those things that it has to be earned. And that's a really cool thing that I think is valued more than people realize. And on top of that, beyond what other people think of you, it's what you think of yourself.
Right.
It's a great way to build self-confidence. It's a great way to build belief that you're the type of person that says what you're going to do, that you can do hard things, that you have that grit and discipline that really does carry over when you're working on a new business, you're working on your career, you're working on your relationship, you're raising kids, you're doing all these other things in life. It's like that stuff really goes a long way.
Yep. Yep. And by the way, if you're listening right now and you're like, oh man, it sounds like so much work and so much energy, and how I don't have the energy for all that, that goes back to what we spoke to earlier in the episode, is actually having the energy and getting dialed in with your energy so that you can do all the things you want to do and need to do. And I agree. I'm not a fan of the shortcuts and these kind of weight loss drugs. Like you said, you lose a disproportionate amount of muscle compared to fat. When you do normal weight loss, for every 10 pounds you lose, you might lose maybe 1 or 2 pounds of muscle, right? Whereas these ones, you're losing a much higher ratio of muscle. And then when you go off the drug, if you gain the weight back, you now might be back at the same weight, but with less muscle too on top of it.
Totally.
if you're losing that. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of those.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I think they are a net positive for society, just because there's so many people in our country that really struggle with like true morbid obesity. And these are a solution for some of those people that aren't going to do the things we're talking about. But I also think that the drugs can be used in a way, like I mentioned, it's not rocket science. Lift weights and eat enough protein, and you could use these for a period of time and not experience the extent of issues you and I are talking about. Like, it's just when they're used improperly that they can run into a lot of problems and set yourself up to be in a worse position, a year or 2 years from now. Whereas as a tool, I have lots of people I've worked with who have chosen to use these drugs, these GLP-1 drugs without my input. They're just like, hey, Ryan, I'm going to do this. Now, can you help me like navigate it in a way that's smart? And I was like, of course, like that's exactly the way to be looking at this. So I think that it just comes back to like informed education around this stuff and making sure that you're doing things in a smart way.
Yeah. I've also noticed too, as I've been eating more protein and lifting weights and gaining a little muscle, I am hungrier. Right. And so part of me is like, oh, hey, like, am I eating too much now? Am I eating? But it's like, I can, because I'm eating very clean too, I'm able to kind of feel in and see like, okay, like if this is what my body is, wants right now. And again, you eat a lot. You don't eat a lot of crap though. You eat a lot of good stuff, right? And that's the difference. I feel like right now, I eat a lot. But I'm not gaining weight, right? I feel good. In fact, if anything, I've lost weight while gaining muscle, right? But I feel good because I'm eating good stuff. So I think if you're eating like crap and you're putting all these processed sugars and processed foods in your body, you can't really you don't really have that kind of sense of what's good, what's not. You get like kind of cravings, but you don't know, is it a real, true, genuine thing that your body's telling you to eat, or is it the craving because you just had sugar and you're spiking up and down and you're all messed up? So Ryan, we covered a lot of really, really good stuff here. And again, I recommend you all the time. When I'm in different chat groups that I'm in and, different entrepreneurs and CEOs and people, and they're like, hey, anyone have a good, nutritionist kind of trainer person who can guide me to, get my mental and physical health and energy back? I always recommend you. So hopefully people listening here, if you're really serious about, claiming your energy back, claiming your life, your mental and physical health, highly recommend you work with Ryan. And shout out your website. I think you have if you have a podcast or anything else, social channels that you want to shout out.
Really appreciate the kind words, Talor. It's been awesome to become friends and be on this journey together, man. As far as if people want to learn more, I work with people in a multitude of settings, all telemedicine, all virtual. So if you want to learn more about my functional medicine practice and my programs, ryankennedyhealth.com. Post stuff on social media. Instagram is at Ryan C. Kennedy. And then I do have a podcast, The Ryan Kennedy Show, which you and I did an episode a while back to Laura. And
that's right.
Same kind of thing, really diving into mindset and fitness and functional medicine and all these different ways to optimize your life and your wellness. So encourage you to tune in if you're interested in that type of material. And man, this has been awesome.
It's been a lot of fun, Ryan. Look forward to seeing you again. I look forward to experiencing more of your breathwork sessions, and keep doing what you're doing, man. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, man.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.